this next session, creating meaningful differentiation. You know, you're all in startups, you're entrepreneurs. It is very hard to really understand how you stand out above the crowd. And that's what this discussion is going to explore. So please help me welcome Carole Bellis. She's a partner at Kilpatrick, Townsend, and she's going to lead this excellent discussion for us. Carole?
Hi. So we were really eager to get started here. Wanted to get going on creating differentiation. And I think that from, our brief resumes are up here, but I thought it might be helpful for each of our panelists to just give you a little bit more information about how they're coming at what their point of view is on this as an entree to our conversation. So let's see. Doug, you want to start it off?
Sure. It's great to be here. I know we're the only thing between you and lunch, so they said we could take as long as we want. So we're going to probably do that. No, so I have experience both as a serial entrepreneur in the tech industry, in the enterprise software space. I also taught entrepreneurship at the University of Michigan and worked with Steve Blank at the National Science Foundation iCore rollout. And now as a venture capitalist in Michigan eLab, which is an early stage venture fund. So I'll be trying to determine which hat to use, and depending on the question that Carole throws at me.
I've been a serial entrepreneur for over 20 years of my career, and I've been an investor, started with angel investing, set up a fund. I also have a social impact venture on the side, so I look at differentiation from actually all these three angles, and it'll be fun to talk to Zack and Doug both about that.
So my name is Zack. Most of my career has been in building very high volume businesses where the product was really key. Previously, I was COO at Zendesk, which has had a very successful IPO. I've had $3 billion exits, and I'm currently COO at Duo Security, and we have offices here in California and also out in Michigan. And I'm happy to talk about disruption or other things related to that.
So Doug, why don't we start with you? When you're looking at multiple opportunities in the field, what sorts of differentiators, what are the key differentiators you're looking for?
So we only have a few minutes, so I can't go through much of this. When you're looking at it and making an investment, there's lots of differentiators you're looking for. I'll focus on team just for a moment because we do early stage investing, so the team is absolutely critical. You want to find the best people, and how do you define best? So we're looking for people that are wicked smart, very, very smart people who can internalize data internally, externally, and process it and make decisions rapidly. Speed, pace, activities in which they can move at lightning speed, faster than humans can. Later when you scale, you can bring in more mortals, but early on you want the superhumans. So we're looking for teams that have those characteristics, and then cohesion, right? Teams that really stand out to me are teams that really work together well, finish each other's sentences, know what each other eats for breakfast, right? I mean, the people that work together as a cohesive unit. So those are best three characteristics of team. There's all sorts of other important characteristics on market and opportunity, but...
For those, I mean, in building the team, though, you're just going out and looking for the people with the pedigree that you want, or, I mean, how do you come across to the investment community as really knowing and that you guys work together? Is that, come from time? What's your thought there?
Maybe one thing I'll say is when I'm building a team is really looking for track record. People who have experience in the job and aren't going to tap out a year or 2 years into it when you're growing. Now, of course, when you're an early stage company, you kind of get who you can get. It's not always easy to get the best people, but you want to continue to invest and have a trajectory there. But I think it's very important to look for track record, as opposed to sometimes you say, well, if we had somebody from such and such a company, the name from somebody who did marketing at Salesforce or somebody who did engineering at Oracle or what have you. And I would really look more at the accomplishment of the individual rather than just, well, what company were they at or what university were they at?
For me, from a people perspective, in my entrepreneurial ventures and as an investor now, I think the most important differentiator is the DNA of the people that I bring on board or I invest into. And by DNA, I mean the value system, because people don't stick along for a long time if their values don't match. At certain points of time, they will break apart, and that's a huge risk to money and to the venture. So having said that, of course, there are other differentiators from, I'll approach it from an entrepreneurial perspective. I think when we look at an entrepreneurial venture to do, there are two things. Is it disruptive, or is it something that's been done before? And then what are the key differentiators that I look for at that point in time that might create value? And when I say value, it could be anything, better performance of something that's been done before, or better accessibility, greater quality. All of those are value-creating things. Then, of course, from a differentiating perspective, we look at better utilization of the same technology. For example, credit cards, the magnetic strip is a great technology, but taking the same technology and using it as hotel keys is a huge differentiator again, so that becomes a differentiating thing. Creating mass markets out of small applications. VMware did that very successfully. They took whatever they had as a application testing product to something that's huge, something that's worth billions of dollars. So these things are things that, from an entrepreneurial perspective, are differentiators. And as entrepreneurs, we look at that. But as investors, we look at how to scale these things into a differentiating perspective and then make them disruptive if possible.
When you're, what's the action plan for differentiation? How do you get there? I mean, you've got, what's the next step? We want to differentiate. Where do I go from here? Is this where the minimal MVP, for those of us who thought it was Steph Curry, but I guess, what can you help me with this one?
So maybe I'll give a thought on this. The most important thing when it comes to differentiation is you got to get outside the building. You have to talk to some customers and understand what is the problem that they are trying to solve. And why is it they're not using one of the existing solutions that's there? And in disruption, a lot of people in the Valley talk about disruption. How many people here watch the HBO show Silicon Valley? You should all watch it because it's too close to the real world. It's kind of a satire, obviously, of how people throw around terms like disruption and how they want to change the world. And it's very important to understand the problem that you can solve for somebody, and are they part of a underserved market? And so if you're competing in a space where there are incumbents, large companies, you have to figure out a way to not do what they're doing. Because if you're a startup, you're never going to have more salespeople than Oracle. You're never going to have more, or better APIs than Salesforce. You're never going to have a broader footprint than any of the large companies. You have to think about a specific audience whose needs are not met and how you solve their problem. And if you do that, then you probably have something that is differentiated in the market.
How much disruption is too much? I mean, when you get into it, this can be...
Well, I think disruption is, you have to be all in on disruption. So you can't say, well, we're disruptive with our sales approach, but our pricing is traditional. Or, our platform play is disruptive, but, we're just going to do traditional enterprise sales. You really have to have a mindset around disruption that says, we're going to do things differently, not just for the sake of being different, but because you cannot compete on the traditional criteria with companies that are 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 times larger. And so that's why if you think about the massive waves in the last 10 or 20 years, cloud and SaaS have been massively disruptive. And everything about them is different than the traditional approach to software that we had in the heavy enterprise era of a Siebel, PeopleSoft, SAP, et cetera. And then if you look at the companies that were from that era, I mean, they don't exist anymore, mostly. So you want to think about how do you do something that is different from a pricing point of view, easier to use, easier to sell, easier to buy, et cetera.
So just to add on to what Zack just said, so there is a difference between being disruptive and differentiating yourself in the market. You could work on something that already exists and make it better, and that's a differentiator, or you could do something really out of whack and be disruptive. From an investing point of view, these are two separate paths, and VCs specialize in both or either at that point in time. But as an entrepreneur, I think the question that, and mostly when we're thinking of a disruptive business model or a differentiating business model, as entrepreneurs, we think about, hey, how do I change things? But I think the thought process has to move to, instead of only will the customer pay for it, how does it make value for the customer? How does it increase the value of what has already been done, and how does it add more ease of use for the customer? So I think that is very important.
I want to come back to the MVP question, because I think it's one of the two most overused words in entrepreneurship, pivot and MVP, right? So what's really important when people are doing their minimum viable product and they're trying to find that intersection between the primary features, the minimum primary features, and enough value to their customer that their customer will buy it. Not evaluate it, not play with it, but buy it, right? In the MVP space, what you're really trying to do is validate that. And what I see often happen is that people don't think about the MVP and what it's intended to do. It's not intended to be the scalable product that you're going to build off of an IPO on, right? You're trying to achieve an objective. And too often, when there is not a match, the minimum primary features do not solicit a sale. The entrepreneur may say, I just need to add more features, right? That's my first thing I do. It may be the customer's wrong, and you need to pivot that. It may be the primary thing this product is doing is not delivering value. But by just adding more and more features, we get into a very runaway condition that doesn't scale ultimately for keeping you differentiated. It's like me trying to sell you my car. You don't want it? I'll throw in my DVD collection and my kid brother to wash it on the weekend, right? It's not the point, okay? So MVP really has to be thought of very specifically in your actions when you're trying to find your differentiation.
Yeah, maybe the other way to think about MVP is do one thing really well. Don't try to do everything. And if you look at products that ultimately were disruptive, like MySQL or Zendesk or Salesforce, the early versions really didn't do very much. But what they did better than anyone else. Early versions of MySQL didn't have transactions, they didn't have backup, lots of missing features. But if you were a PHP developer looking for some way to store data, it was free, and it was fast, and it was easy to get up and running. And so one of the things that if you are a disruptive business, you will find some audience telling you, that's a toy. Why would anyone put their CRM contacts in the cloud? I would never do that. That just means you're talking to the wrong person. You have to go find the other person, the company who says, I have no other alternative. So actually your minimum viable product, it's pretty good. Now, I wouldn't go tell them it's minimum viable product, but you're looking for that intersection of the problem you solve really well and an audience that is underserved and isn't going to use the incumbent solution. And most startups make the mistake of thinking that they have to just keep adding features all the time, and usually that's not the gating factor in their growth. It may be that their marketing or their lead gen or their sales efforts are a little bit behind. So be careful if you find yourself always saying, well, we lost another deal, we need to add more features. Sometimes it's true, but you may be weighted too heavily in one direction.
And then when I mentor entrepreneurs, especially just starting up, and they're looking to get a fix on the business model, what I tell them is just list everything. List everything that you're doing differently from your competition, because that's the value you provide to your customer. But then pick one thing as a primary differentiator, and everything else becomes secondary. And the rest just weed themselves in.
So focus and execution are really critical to differentiation.
Yeah, I think you have to identify things you're not going to do. And as an example, at Zendesk, we made a decision very early on. We're not doing on-premise for anybody. We don't care how much money they're going to pay us. We're just not doing it. We're all cloud, we're all in, and we're not going to go down that other path. And if somebody wanted it to be on-premise, we realized we just have to qualify them out.
So that's a great example of differentiation by focus. And I was thinking back about this topic when I started a mobile enterprise company a long time ago, back when mobile was just taking off. I'm talking Palm Pilot, Windows 95, dial-up modems. Anybody remember that? Yeah. Cloud computing didn't exist. Well, if the server room caught fire and smoke came out in a cloud, then you'd have cloud computing back then. That was the closest we had. So we were the first in mobility in enterprise management, and there was a lot of pressure, as you're saying, from customers and competition to add features. And so there's a risk in doing the opposite of differentiation, blending in to the competition. And we had a lot of pressure to add features to do what the desktop players were doing. And as we started doing that, we started increasing our expenses, we started increasing our sales cycle, and we almost lost control. Fortunately, we didn't, and we brought it back, but that was a great lesson for me. In differentiation, you can actually, if you have it, you can lose it by actually adding in tons of features.
So we just have an audience question. Does the customer really know? Or is differentiation more for founders to interpret the true need based on inputs from customers? I think we just...
This might fall into that category of where Steve Blank this morning talked about who's a visionary and who is merely hallucinating. I think customers have a very good understanding of the problems they face. And product teams and founders would do well to listen to that and understand the problems. I would say customers are not always good at articulating or architecting a solution to their problem. So it's better to really spend time listening to customers about their problems, how they do their job, how it went, how the project worked, what surprises there were, and then think about how you solve their problems. But don't just show up and throw up and say, here's my solution to your problem, without listening to them. In fact, you're better off doing those in two distinct meetings.
So what I suggest to most entrepreneurs is, even when they're raising money, I think it's a very good idea to involve your customer right at the time when you're actually figuring out what your primary differentiator is going to be or what your business model is going to be. I suggest to a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with that they should get a customer board of advisors. And then they have different perspectives from at least 4 or 5 key customers who actually become a part of your team to build a product or a service that you're trying to build.
Yeah, I think customer advisory boards are really good, but you have to be careful that, like, you're not going to come up with a great product by having a focus group talking about all their issues together, because you'll get 1 or 2 people who dominate the discussion. There is a time to have a customer advisory board and get input, but in the early stage, you kind of want to talk to customers about their problem and not what they think the market wants. I would say customers are awful at that. And if you have customers or prospects who say to you, yeah, I think the market would be really excited about that. Not me personally. You have to listen very carefully. You're asking them, does this solve their problem? Not do they think it's interesting for some other mythical market.
Yep, I exactly said that. So when you get a customer advisory board, what you end up doing is they become your first customers, because you're actually trying to build a product that's akin to the problems that they have. But unless you understand their problems properly, you're not able to architect a good pivoted product.
Okay, so we've got another audience question. What do you do if your investors push for features or specs that you may not feel are a priority?
Tell your investors to pound sand.
So it's a great, yeah. The dynamic between the investors and the founders has to be strong. It has to be a strong, transparent communication. And if you have a situation where, well, one, if the investors are dictating feature sets, something's gone horribly wrong in the whole dynamics, right? That means there's no trust. The investors are meddling. You get the wrong management team. Something's gone horribly wrong. So when you differentiate as an entrepreneur, and as thinking as an investor, as an entrepreneur, you need to look for investors with the same type of sensitivity. What investor is right for you in order to make sure you build that chemistry, right? Because you never want to get in that situation.
So I know we have an audience that is outside from Silicon Valley as well, but the ecosystem here works very differently. And getting an investor on board is a very important decision, because it's like getting married. It is as important as getting married, because You don't get the wrong investor in who doesn't understand your business model, who doesn't understand the growth possibilities, and who cannot bring value to you. You don't do that. So I think in the Valley it works differently in the sense that if you have a good product, the investors will fight for you. And if you have a good track record, the investors will fight to get on board for you, and not vice versa. So from that angle, I think the choice of investor is very, very important. You just can't just pick up anybody who's giving you money and put them on board and have them be a part of your decision-making process, or give them the importance of being a part of an equity shareholder in your company. So the choice of investor is a very, very important decision.
So tell me, Meera, social entrepreneurship is a really important differentiator for you. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Over the course of the past few years, dabbled a lot in investments that have had social impact. When I say social impact, it probably doesn't mean that we're elevating, we actually investing in ventures that are creating a difference to the customer, to the society, and community at large. When that happens, I believe the value of an organization grows immensely, because the use case becomes a problem-solving use case rather than just a money-making use case. So social entrepreneurship is a method by which we've tried to balance the ROI on the investment with the social impact that the investment has.
I wanted to pick up on that as well. Are there any social entrepreneurs in the audience? One. Okay, sorry. Then we won't spend a lot of time on it. But the reason I asked is that we often, when we talk about social entrepreneurship, we don't tend to hold entrepreneurs who are social entrepreneurs to the same standards in differentiation and execution that we do with non-social entrepreneurs. I think that's a mistake. Actually, it should be the opposite. I think social entrepreneurs, you have to be better than everybody else in this room, because the margins are smaller, the customers have less money, and usually there's a regional distance, a geographic distance to execution. So execution, differentiation is absolutely important in social entrepreneurship.
I would disagree with you a little bit. The margins and the ROI of social entrepreneurship could be just as good as any other form of entrepreneurship. And with that, I look at Elon Musk as a social entrepreneur by doing what he's doing with Tesla. He's creating technology that would impact the world for a huge period of time. Yeah. He's making a difference in the world, and that is social impact.
Can I jump on that? I think it's a great point. What I find really important is that there should not be a distinction between social entrepreneurs and what they do to get up in the morning and drive forward from most entrepreneurs in the world. Because the best entrepreneurs, and you're using Tesla as an example, are out there trying to change the world. They're trying to make a dent in the universe. It's not about money, right? And I think that's really important. So I would agree on that standpoint. I think some other elements of it I might disagree.
So I'm curious what some of the companies are that you're currently following, and what is it about them that excite you? Why don't we start with, who wants to start off?
Okay, I think I'm following Tesla. Really, the way Elon Musk is creating a vision, has created a vision. Today we're thinking of, with the way he's going, we're thinking of homes where energy would be supplied by batteries and not electricity grids, creating an impact to the future. I'm really looking at Google really closely as well, because of the way that they are experimenting with driverless cars and with even medical devices. It's going to be huge impact. I was at a conference where somebody said that very soon won't be a far off thing when cars with drivers will be illegal. So we're actually making a huge change in the way we look at road safety, or we look at energy, or we look at renewability of our resources on the planet.
Do the regulatory hurdles that come up with something like switching to all of a sudden to driverless vehicles, does that not deter you from?
Yeah, so as an investor, so it depends on the investment thesis that such investors have. and even entrepreneurs in terms of how long can they deal with it, or what is the capacity to overcome the regulatory hurdles. So as an investor, there are different types of investors that invest in groundbreaking technologies and things that change the world for the better, or things that haven't been done before, and that's true disruption. And there are investors who are looking for an ROI within a certain period of time, and so you got to choose who you are partnering with. Again, the investor is very important, but then again, your vision also matters, your track record matters, and so does your ability to deal with obstacles like the regulatory obstacles. There are countries even today where Skype is illegal. So, part of the plan.
Doug, what are you following? What's exciting?
So I'm following regions more than specific companies. Michigan eLab, as you can tell by our name, we focus on an emerging market called Michigan, where actually the largest population of engineers from Michigan are actually not only in Southeast Michigan, they're in Silicon Valley. So we look for these connections between Silicon Valley and emerging regions. And I think there's a lot of interesting startups happening in those types of areas. We focus specifically on big data and cloud, where it intersects things like advanced manufacturing, enterprise software, and mobility. And there's a lot of exciting things happening, not just in Silicon Valley. That's the funny thing, right? There's more happening outside the world now in these emerging regions that I think have better cost of living, more efficiency in growth, better pricing of opportunities that everyone should be looking at. As you mentioned, not everybody's from Silicon Valley in this room. There's a lot happening outside.
Zack, how about you? Urlocker, I guess, it would be one that excites you very much.
Gosh, I'm mostly busy trying to run a company. I do spend some time with entrepreneurs and founders in various startups. I think there's still a lot of room to run in open source technologies, in basic cloud applications, but my focus is mostly on the B2B side. And, not every business sets out to change the world, but sometimes those companies that actually create some interesting infrastructure software have a lot of impact on the world. So if you take MySQL, MySQL is the largest deployed database in the world, and it's free. And anybody can take that and build a business on it, and we've seen tons of companies build huge revenue streams on top of open source infrastructure. So, maybe Tesla's groundbreaking. I don't know. I mean, it's a car for rich people.
They just launched a very cheap car for other people.
Yeah, well, so maybe, it's interesting, but again, you don't have to create a Tesla or SpaceX to have impact on the world. You can create something that actually gets deployed and used by thousands of people, and that has a dent and an impact on society.
Just to add to what you said, creation of Tesla and the technology that Tesla uses, or SpaceX, these are open patents that allow other manufacturers to use these technologies to build mass market products. Having said that, I think the innovation that a company like Tesla brings forth is the battery life, is a different source of energy to run cars or automotive, or even the energy in homes. So I thought that was most disruptive.
It could be, yeah. We don't know yet.
So as not to disrupt your lunch, we're clicking down here to 9:08. So I think any parting comments that you guys want to make? I haven't gotten any more questions.
Yeah. I hope somebody will tweet some photos and quotes from this. Okay, great.
Yeah, just to summarize what I think heard here today, some of the points, the focus, the differentiation, both in early stage, but as you grow, disruption is really important, and other characteristics such as social. I mean, these are all sound kind of abstract. So get some advisors, get some mentors, work with other entrepreneurs to learn how they translate to your business, mostly.
I agree. I think for any startup, just having a model that differentiates them from the competition is very essential, because that's really the value that the customer will pay for.
And really focus on a specific problem that somebody has, and make sure they're willing to spend money to solve that problem. If you do that, you can build a business, and then you can layer on other capabilities later.
Thanks, everybody. Bon appetit. Enjoy your lunch.